Joey Kaufman covers USC for the Orange County Register. Joey, it's game week. Are you ready?
I'm ready. I'm ready for actual real-life football, and I would like to find out who wins the game because I've about run through every scenario in my head.
I know. We still have I've still got 2 radio shows to get through and a couple more articles to write, and I feel like I've written every possible thing I could write. So I'm actually glad we'll be able to recap a game and trends and all that stuff. So what's the latest from USC? They're going to have a new left tackle. Is that right?
Yeah. Zach Wheeler was the returning left tackle, but it wasn't too big of a surprise. He's not going to start in the opener. Chuma Edoga, a sophomore, will make his first career start at left tackle. Chuma started 2 games last year at right tackle. But Wheeler's basically been handicapped all of camp with plantar fasciitis. He had a PRP shot at some point. So he hasn't really practiced much in 2 or 3 weeks, although he started to practice a little more this week. But they're going to be missing their senior left tackle.
How big a blow do you think that is, given Alabama last year led the nation in sacks?
I think it's a pretty serious blow because you have a guy who's had some experience and he started last year and a little bit before, so it's certainly something to note. But and they didn't move Zach Banner from right tackle to left tackle. They're moving in Edoga, a sophomore, so it's going to be a big test for him. It's a lot of unknowns, really.
Speaking to Joey Kaufman, covers Southern California for the Orange County Register, as we prepare for the actual game against Alabama versus Southern Cal. Feels like we've been talking about it for a couple of years, but it's now upon us. Joey, a lot of us here in Tuscaloosa, there was such history around that 1970 Alabama Southern Cal game, and Clay Helton has reached back for some of that history. He brought in Sam Cunningham, the running back that absolutely carved Alabama up that night. What was his message to the team? And it looks like he's trying to, do whatever he can to get his team fired up for this matchup.
The message seemed kind of twofold. They watched the Showtime documentary about the game that came out a couple of years ago. They watched that on Saturday night. So I think they kind of took in a little bit of the history of the game and what it meant. Because a lot of these players, they're all 20-year-old kids. Nobody really remembers it at all, or it's a little bit kind of like folklore in a way. And the second part of, I think, the message was he had Sam Cunningham speak with the team yesterday. And the message was basically that this had a big impact on a large stage and it affected a lot of people, but Helton and Cunningham tried to stress with the players that Cunningham was very focused on his role and did what he needed to do and ran the football well and didn't really get caught up in too much of the larger emotions at the time, in the moment. And that's what he kind of wants his players to do, is not get caught up in you're playing a big opener and Jerry World against the defending national champion.
I guess I would assume not very often that Southern Cal is an underdog in a matchup. Are they viewing themselves as underdogs against Alabama, or they still kind of have this air about them that they're Southern Cal?
I think they are kind of a little bit viewing themselves as the underdog. You haven't heard too much about, we have a chip on their shoulder. It's been a lot of respect for Alabama. Alabama's the defending national champion, and we're excited at the opportunity to see how we measure up to them. I think that's kind of been the message and kind of mindset for a lot of the guys. But it is a really weird situation that USC is a double-digit point underdog. It actually hasn't happened since 2011. So you have to go back 5 years to a game where they played Oregon and Chip Kelly, and that was kind of the high watermark of the Lane Kiffin era. They were a 15-point underdog, and they ended up winning out of Oregon 38-35.
Talking to Joey Kaufman, who covers the Trojans for the Orange County Register. For those of us on the other side of the country who don't follow it day to day, how much are the NCAA scholarship limitations still affecting the Trojans, or are they at all?
It has an effect. It's become less pronounced than it was. Probably the peak of where it was at its most effect was about 2013, 2014. Those are the last 2 years where they were limited to 75 scholarships. This is now the second year where they've been allowed to have 85 scholarships. And they actually came into fall camp with 82 scholarships. They put 3 walk-ons on scholarships. They technically have 85, but it's really not quite at the 85 load they would want. But it's probably as much depth as they've had recently. So that's a positive for them. The drawback is a lot of the 85 scholarships are underclassmen because you have to go back a couple of recruiting classes. They weren't able to get a full 25 class. So really about 2/3 of the 85 scholarship players are underclassmen.
I think most Alabama fans around here remember how devastating NCAA sanctions can be. Alabama dealt with it in the 2000s. Speaking with Joey Kaufman, who covers USC for the Orange County Register. There's been some talk as of late that maybe Southern Cal feels a little bit better about their defensive line, maybe in the middle of their defense than they did going in. You think they got a chance to hold up against Alabama and how physical they want to be?
I think they have a chance because they have the body. I mean, they have big guys on the defensive line. They look impressive. They look impressive when they walk off the bus. You're not going to see a small group. The question is whether they're not experienced. They haven't played a ton. And there's the reason for optimism would be that you have talent and you have a defensive coordinator, Clancy Pendergast, who is known for kind of making things simple on players, not giving them too much, giving them one or two assignments, and allowing them to really focus on a specific role. So they can kind of combine those two things. That's maybe their best shot. And they also bring in a graduate transfer from Utah, Stevie, who was a 25-year-old player from Utah, was pretty good last year in reserve for him, so he's able to kind of contribute.
Speaking with Joey Kaufman, who covers the Trojans for the Orange County Register, you mentioned Clancy Pendergast, and he's a guy that's very familiar with Lane Kiffin. Do you think that might play a role in this game, that knowing maybe the way that Lane likes to call plays, the matchups he likes to create, and maybe knowing his thought process a little bit?
I think it definitely plays a role because it's not only Clancy Pendergast, but you have a lot of guys on that staff who know Lane Kiffin very well. Lane Kiffin hired several of them. He hired the running backs coach, Tommy Robinson. He hired T. Martin to be his receivers coach. John Baxter, the special teams coach, was on Lane's first staff at USC and knows Lane back from his Fresno State days when Lane was a graduate assistant. You have Clay Helton, who was Lane Kiffin's quarterback coach. So you have a lot of guys who are intimately familiar with Lane Kiffin, which I think that's something that's certainly going to play some sort of factor. Who knows what, but there's some familiarity certainly with Lane, and vice versa. Lane hired Clancy Pendergast and knows two things about his defense.
Is the Lane Kiffin story a big deal there? Or have people gotten over it? Is he still maybe the butt of jokes there? Or how is he kind of viewed going into this matchup?
I think he's probably that storyline faded a little bit, mostly because I think Steve Sarkisian kind of trumped the Lane Kiffin era in terms of the ridiculousness of it. So I think probably Sarkisian is more of a flashpoint than Lane Kiffin is at this point. And I think at some point Lane Kiffin is going to be viewed as more of a better caretaker of the program. I think history will view him maybe a little more favorably, particularly in light of how the Sarkisian era went about, and you have Lane, who was able to kind of guide the team through his sanctions. He's now been a national championship-winning offensive coordinator again. So I don't think he's quite the lightning rod that he was a few years ago.
Wrapping up here with Joey Kaufman, who covers USC for the Orange County Register. What's the key to this matchup in your mind? What does USC have to do to be in this game in the fourth quarter and maybe even win it outright?
I think they probably need to make a couple turnovers. I think an interesting factor that I'm kind of interested about is Adoree Jackson was a guy who played offense and defense last year, receiver and corner, and in this camp he really focused at corner, and coaches credit him for being able to make plays, and he's had a few interceptions where he snagged the Max Brown. And I think USC needs something like that, a punt return, a interception for a touchdown, some sort of play where they're able to get a big burst from, because I don't think defensive line and offensive line for four quarters, that's a matchup that exactly favors them. So I think they need a couple of breaks to go their way. So that's kind of an X factor that I'm looking for.
Yeah, Nick Saban today on the SEC Coaches Teleconference did say that Juju Smith-Schuster has Des Bryant-like ability and recognizes he might be a potential matchup nightmare for Alabama. Joey, thanks so much for your time again this week, and I look forward to meeting you in person out in Arlington.
Yeah, thanks for having me on there, and I'm looking forward to running into you as well.